34 on April 16th. For Animal Care Advisory Committee, we'll start with roll call.
Dominguez here.
Jackie McCollough.
Ron Smith here.
Diane Cardenas.
Okay, is there anyone for public comment?
Speak up. Sorry.
Public comment, anyone? So we'll move on to the approval of minutes. Did everyone have a chance to look over minutes?
We did.
Great, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. There was no absences last meeting, so we'll move on to staff reports.
Okay, staff reports. Yes. They're getting the zoonosis report for us right now. So in front of you, you will see a little packet with your regular notes. The top one is, I know from previous meetings we've discussed to have a different format for the reports that I give it to you guys. So here is a sample, right? Cynthia has worked with Million in order to try to get these better for us. This first page is an example of what we would like to present, but we want some feedback. Do you like the way this looks? Is there anything else that we wanted to add to this?
One thing I'd like to add is, I think, Ron Smith had mentioned in October of last year, about a 3-month run-in, comparison. So we can see trends for the previous 2 months. That'd be the only thing I'd like to see added on there.
The only thing I would say is that with animal sheltering, it's cyclical in the time of year, right? So if you compare May to June, you're not gonna get a good picture of where the shelter's operating. Because May, there's not as much business in general, but when school lets out, there's a lot more business. And so comparing year to year, same time, gives a better picture of what was happening
Well,
versus.
it's a better picture than 2024 versus 2025.
Well, no, it's not. That's what I was saying, is that when you have, like, if you compare May to June, because of the nature of the business, and more children are in school, right? So when children are in school, you get less calls for service, you get less adoptions, you get less volunteers, you get less rescue pools, because animals don't get placed that last month of the year, or the last month of the school year as well. And so if you compare that to June, where everything's gonna pick back up, you're not getting a real picture of what the shelter operations are doing, as far as how they look from year to year, or how they would look from apple to apple. So that's why you compare year to year, so that because June of every year is gonna have the same impacts generally as far as how society functions year over year. And so that's why shelters generally compare their stuff year to year versus month to month.
So we can say that in April, which is March, which is still cool, we don't get the number of complaints that we do in July when people leave their dogs in the sun, right?
Yes, and in April, you don't get as many, so you're not gonna get as many adoptions. You're gonna get more calls for cats than you would get for dogs. Like, there's things that happen in the environment and society that impact the numbers, that don't carry from month to month, it carries from year to year and season to season. And so that's why I suggest doing year to year versus month to month, but however you guys want us to present it, we can absolutely do that.
The original suggestion was like 3-month run, or what?
Yeah, you came up with that in, I think it was October.
Oh, go ahead.
And Ron, Mr. Smith, do you wanna see, May, June, July, August? May, June, July, what?
I would think just 3-month run, it would be sufficient, and if there's a deviation, say June is a heavier month or something, then it could be well within the normal range. It's just happens every June. Would be the explanation.
But you won't be able to tell that because you're looking at April and May. You see what I'm saying? Right? If you're looking at June 24 versus June 25, you could see like, hey, this is a normal uptick. But if you're looking at May 25 compared to June 25, it won't give you that same information.
The same information?
Right, because what you're saying is it won't be like an apples to apples, right?
Well-
There could be certain spikes here and there, right? If you compare it just on a 3-month basis. So it could be, there was a great impound, they had to impound $100 because of hoarding or whatnot, right? And so that would spike the numbers up, 1 month. It would spike numbers, and it wouldn't be a true apples to apples comparison in terms of if you're trying to find out a trend. So if you want to find a trend, it's better to compare June of FY25 versus June of FY24, because then we can see that,
Well,
okay,
you
maybe
can
it's
still plug in a year, my entire purpose, you mentioned it was a trend that would make us, how are things going? Are they getting worse, getting better?
the 3 months
You
is
can still throw
just,
in last year.
yeah, but the 3 months of what you're saying, like it could be the time of year, the season or whatnot, going 3 months versus 3 months may not really indicate a trend. Where if we look at it June of this year versus June of last year.
Well, I mean, that's.
Yeah.
It's colder in December than it is in June.
You're not looking for a trend, you're just looking like what happens in May, what happens in June, what happens in July.
Well, it'll give you a trend.
Well, we can't.
Well, it'll give you a trend of society, right? So it'll tell you that while the kids are in their last month of school, people aren't going to the shelter and placing calls. But when school lets out, the kids are out playing, there's gonna be more calls for service, there's gonna be more people adopting, more volunteers, that sort of thing. What it won't tell you is if that's normal.
So
Well, if you compared it to the previous year.
that's what she's saying. Yeah, we would compare it to the previous year.
Well-
So if we have March of this year, then we would show the comparison to March of last year.
Well,
And if you're for it, I think we can give you an example next meeting. We can show you what it looks like for the year comparison to the actual 3 months. Something like that?
Fair enough.
I have a suggestion. I understand both of you guys and the need to compare. I personally prefer looking at from June of last year to June of this year. And I'd like to see that on here, like, if it was, this page is March, if there was the exact same page for the previous year, great. But I think to Ron's point, what would probably be good is if we could commit to saying once a quarter, we're gonna review the previous quarter of the year.
Well, if you do that, then it should be in comparison to the previous quarter of the previous year.
I see both sides. What I'd like, and this is probably gonna be too much work or maybe crazy, but like once a year, we could get just the previous 12 months, this year, and then the previous 12 months, which is going way far back. So you have almost like a 2-year, summary.
So
That's way too much, maybe.
You could, except, so there's nuances too, right? So one is budget
Right.
goes up, staffing goes up, there's maybe little minutiae that the data may not capture. On top of that, right, there's some refinement on that.
So we're still doing refinement, yeah, and so I can give you that information, I can run a report that says, tell me all of this information, like on this sheet here, this report is fixed, right? So all the information on this top sheet, I can run it and it'll tell me for 12 months, this is your total. But the rest of the information, all of those things, we're still delving into and building out those reports.
Straight from Chameleon.
Yeah, with Chameleon.
And just for background, this was worked on with Citygate as well.
Yes,
So this
yes.
is with Citygate and taking obviously, best practices when it comes to municipal animal care reporting. So just.
Yes, and there's options to add in slides like intakes, you could compare them by year, however many years back you wanna go. The problem we run into is going to be on the historical data, going back too far, is the types of intake categories have been shifted a lot here, so.
Yeah, that's.
The business model has been changed several times.
Yeah.
And so, right, so again, it's, it was in police department, they ran it one
One way,
type
now
of
it's
way.
run a
It
different
was
way.
health district, ran in one type of way. And it was a neighborhood housing, ran in one type of way. And so now, being that we're at the junction where we're
We're adjusting the best
to have
practice.
a.
Yeah, and then trying to
business
take into account some of the discrepancies that keep
Yeah.
popping up.
So I like the format of this. I think it's really good. I think what I'm hearing from a variety of people is we just need to commit to how we're going to review the information. Cause it looks like this report is So what I'm hearing from everyone is that at our monthly meetings, we're going to review that month compared to that month of the previous year. I personally would like to review quarterly that larger chunk and annually, like Roland is talking about.
Yeah, and the annual's gonna be probably a lot more work, but
I
I
have
think it's really nice to see that.
I also have a template that we use as well, that's just a spreadsheet that we just, for ease of not having to pull reports all the time, that we plug information to for quick referencing. So I can send that to you if you want, if that's
Sure.
something that would be easier
Sure.
than trying to format the intake subtypes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, sure, that would be great. You know, and as we move forward, Chameleon is really an adaptable program, and so as we move forward and we get the reports built in Chameleon, current and new data going forward will not be hard. We will just run into that wall at the start of 2024, where that back data, beyond July of 2024, I'm not gonna have a historical knowledge, right? I can't say this is what we did and that's what we did to fix those discrepancies that are in there. And so that's where we're gonna kind of run into, I can't promise these numbers are right situation, you know what I'm saying? But once we get to the point where we can say, yes, absolutely, these numbers are correct going forward, we can at least give you that, and then this is what we feel based on previous reports that it was comparable last year.
So would you say that the report issues are fixed, or you're still working on that?
So it's a big beast, and it's a piece at a time, and yeah, we're still working on it for sure, because it has to happen in the middle of all the other things, but.
So is it because the reports aren't created correctly, or is it because of information not being inputted correctly?
So we're getting the data entry issues solidified, but we're also updating our field values. So how we code the data that's going in, how we classify it, we need to change that, because that's still kind of willy-nilly. And the staff is uniformly entering the information now. We've eliminated a lot of some of the really old types of information or old types of categories they were using, but we want to get to a modern, relatable, these types of categories that you see on this report versus some of the categories that we have, like HFLs, or, you know, we have cruelty and confiscate instead of confiscate cruelty. Like there's just tweaks and changes we have to make the data more reliable, more consistent, and more universal across what shelters expect to see.
And so will there be a written SOP for the data
Yes.
entry?
Yes, so that's actually written. What we have to do now is we're gonna be working with Chameleon to go in and add those updates. We have some problems with our administrative password for whatever reason. There's a bug in the system that Chameleon's trying to run down. But it doesn't allow us to make the updates we wanna make. So we're in the process of trying to get that fixed.
And to be clear, this is legacy, so this isn't a problem that was created by the group here, this
Yes.
is legacy. So a lot of things that were fixed as legacy, so they have to do two jobs, right? One is run the day-to-day and to fix up
Yeah,
legacy.
it's an ongoing.
With the limited, resources that they have.
I'm curious, is this sitting on top of Crystal reports?
It is Crystal Reports. And so part of the problem with that is that Crystal Reports, there's individuals who are able to make and edit reports that didn't go into the main Chameleon database. And so we're still in the process of collecting all of the people's who've been here. What report do you use? What access do you have in getting those solidified into one central location, which is Chameleon, and the only reports you run are out of Chameleon. And so that's why, that way, like I've been saying, is we'll get the same answer every time to the same question.
So, Ms. J, so this quarter, so you would, or we would see, like, let's say next meeting, we would see January, February, and March, we would see some numbers? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think the solution to the 3-month idea is to do, like, realistically, if we were already doing it, we would have done it in April. We would have looked at January, February, March of this year compared to January, February, March of last year. So I think having that kind of built into our schedule of meetings for the year, and then in January or February, depending on how long it takes to compile the data, to be able to compare the full year compared to the previous full year, and preferably like several full years before that.
So because I'm done, so we want January, February, March, and we can do that in April.
And then, so April, May, June, so then July, we'll look at April, May, June.
So so we start our fiscal year, fiscal year starts October. So then from there, October, so it'll be October, November, December, right?
So the report would be generated in January.
Right. Yeah, I
And
think,
so then like next month you could get,
yeah, we can just
Yeah.
shift
So we
that.
would get this, but in 3 months. We would get this, but with 3 months.
once a quarter, yes,
Once a quarter.
once a quarter, yeah.
I don't know quarters, because I don't come from that.
So it's taking your year and breaking it into 4
Four,
pieces, right?
I understand that much, I had.
So not every month would you get it, not every month would you get it, is all I meant, is you would get it at the
End of the quarter.
month following the end of the quarter.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have comments on the new report? The formatting of the new report?
I think it's great. This is what I was working on. I don't know, that last time I running that dumb little sample. Something like this speaks more volume than just looking at rows and columns of numbers. Because, the numbers are there, you can go back and look at those. And then you see a very quick, easy to understand graphic representation.
And we can do
I
that
prefer
for
to-
the majority of the data that's included in the chart.
And I think the only other thing I might add is these pie charts for the intakes as well.
Sure. The other thing that I did not put in, would be a pie chart for the euthanasias. And by euthanasia type, if you're interested in that, the specific types of euthanasia as to why. I know you guys usually ask on those.
I don't necessarily need a pie chart for
Okay.
that. But, yeah.
Okay.
So which report is gonna have, is it the same information as the old?
Yes,
looking
so as we
report in
have
there?
in in our old existing reports, right, this information, one is getting, refined, right? So we're checking all the sources, making sure all that is clear. And once we know the sources are correct, we're converting it into the new format.
So for the purpose of today's meeting, are we looking at the front page or are we looking at the old style report? 'Cause
The
I-
front page is your example on what we would like to shift to.
Not
So we
real
wanted to-
numbers.
And then
It is your numbers.
It is real numbers,
Okay,
so we wanted to give you that sample. And then we gave you the old format for today's meeting, just so you have all the same information.
And what this tells us is it's for the field reports. So the field reports have not been converted. So you're gonna see some animal activity and information in these reports that unfortunately, they don't pull from the right fields in Chameleon.
okay,
So this is specifically for the field information.
okay. Cause I just noticed like first glance, incoming dogs doesn't match.
They don't pull from the right fields.
Okay,
It
so
doesn't-
what's more accurate at this
The
time?
blue report,
The blue.
top report, yeah.
And remind me, this, intake cruelty, that means we took 15 dogs because of cruelty.
Correct. Okay. So, we have.
Do you want us to read through the whole thing?
I don't. Does anyone need them to read through it?
No,
Okay.
Okay, great. So, yeah, just remember when you're looking at the animal statistics for intakes, it's your top sheet.
So then just to be clear, we have one version, our regular monthly, where it's just comparing March of 225 versus March of 2024. We have to watch it, we can't go too far back because that data still, we don't know.
Yeah.
And then from there, after the quarter's done, then we'll bring a report back showing the quarter versus the previous fiscal year's quarter.
And then we'll do
And
an
then what's
annual.
here.
And then we-
Yeah. So it'd be like 2 years, previous past year then.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
Because they're our fiscal.
Yes. All right,
okay. Good, I like this.
awesome. Okay, and another thing that we do, is we do the zoonosis report monthly, but it's a quarterly report. So,
So we can add that in with your quarterly numbers, is that okay?
Yeah.
instead of reviewing it every meeting, is that okay?
Yes.
Unless there's a specific case within the municipality that,
Then we'll give you the.
Yeah, and so that's not gonna come in the newsletter.
Right.
Like this
Yeah,
is just
yeah.
Zoonoses' newsletter, yeah.
Victoria had a rabies case, was it last week?
Yeah, and especially in bats, some feral cats, you see rabies
Yep.
a couple times a year. And bats all the time, but cats, unfortunately, because they eat the bats, we get it a couple times a year. Okay, so for the zoonosis report, do you guys need me to read it to you, or?
I just was curious about, there's a notice of violation on here, I'm guessing that's because you're updating reports?
Mhm.
Okay. So should we expect that this is accurate currently?
So this is
or-
as accurate as what we have.
Okay.
This is as accurate as what we have. This is one of the ones that we're currently working on right now. And that will be changed into the new format, with bar graphs or either pie charts, whichever disseminates the information better.
I've got a question on the comparison shelter for 6-151-7, selling animals in the public location.
Yes.
In March, I called in about 3 or 4. 2 were for the same fellow, the
With the
trailer,
trailer. He now has a silver trailer,
He does.
but it's the same truck.
same truck.
Same truck.
It's the same truck, same trailer. Was he cited? Can y'all mention or?
So, roadside sales, when we catch them, we do issue citations. But they have to be there, they have to be committing the offense when we get there. And so in order to kind of address that, we're working with CCPD, who is also going to assist with having plainclothes, officers looking for roadside sales and that sort of thing. So we won't necessarily we're working on the communication as far as the
Right.
citations, stuff like that. We won't necessarily have that communication right away, because this just started like a week and a half ago, yeah.
And so what they're also doing is, we gave them a list of what we call hotspots. Cause we all know where they like to set up, right? The
Oh, yeah.
Walmart in Cal and, Moore Plaza.
Moore Plaza
Right in
and
front of the old
Earhart,
Fridays.
Sutherland's.
Best Buy, there's certain spots that they love to go sit at. And so whenever we get a call, we send an officer, these people are getting used to it, right? They know, I've been here 30 minutes, someone has already called on me, and then they move to another spot.
Yeah.
So by the time we get there, they're no longer there.
And just to update, so this is the mayor's office initiative to where they're working with CCPD to where you'll have, the undercover, but the unmarked, where they're, while they're driving, to pay attention at these spots as well.
Yes.
So,
And of course, photographing them is not a good idea. Photographing them.
you can,
If you're at a
If-
distance,
if someone's driving and photographs and send it, right, you can send it, but if you send it to me at 5, and if it takes me 15 minutes, they may be gone by then, right? So it all depends. So yes, you can, but again, if someone feels to be alerted, they just move on to the next location.
But
So
at
that's,
least you have their license plate.
So we have to be able to prove it.
Right.
And so we have, so if someone sends a picture, then that person has to be willing to go to court and testify that they saw it. And then that's the only way that we can use a picture. So then they have to come in, they have to do an affidavit, they have to testify. Because often, by the time we get the picture, we get the officer over there, they've moved on.
So I think some people want to do that. I mean, I know there's plenty of people that are probably complaining a lot about the roadside sales. I mean, is that something that's offered as an option? Like, I know it sounds like a hassle, but there might be people that,
So
Don't-
I would
Yeah.
not suggest to tell the public to go out and actively seek these people and go up to them and take their pictures of their vehicles, because people do not like their pictures taken, especially of their vehicles, especially if they know you're gonna send it to someone. So I don't want any fights started.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want anything to look like aggression on anyone's part towards someone else, because I don't want that. I don't want it to start any other part of the community, because that's what it would do.
and here's another example. So they'll get calls, right, with someone saying, hey, my neighbor's doing this and that. Hey, what's your neighbor address or this and that? No, won't leave it, click.
Right.
So,
I run into that a lot.
Right.
All the people that I know will call up or text me, it's like it's happening again. it's like, well, call them out in emergency, like, no, I don't wanna get involved.
Right.
And I can't be in all these places when this is occurring, so by the time, that if I can make it over there, the trailer fellow is gone.
So,
The
but
T
there's
ranch.
a couple measures, so you have the police involved when they're doing work down on our cars where they're going by their thing, right? This is an initiative, by the mayor. That started, I believe, a couple weeks ago, as
Yeah, it was
well,
about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago.
week and a half ago. So
That's good to hear.
it's a
It
team
happens
effort.
in the summer when they sell puppies for some reason.
They've
I don't
been,
know.
they've been out, sooner this year,
They
I think. They have, because I have actually drove up to a couple right in front of Best Buy and said, hey, it is illegal for you to be out here selling animals. I don't know if you've been out here before, but I have told one of my officers to come and issue a citation. I'm giving you the education right now, if you are caught again, and you would definitely get a citation. And some of them are like, oh, this is my first time, I didn't know, which I don't know if that's true or not, but I want them out of the parking lot, right? So if I see one, I'll do that. And I've had people be very aggressive with me, so that's why I'm saying I don't want someone from the public to go up to someone
Right.
or to take a picture or video.
How does well, for the CCPD, the plainclothes thing you're talking about, is there any, discussion of like when they see signs, like selling, puppies, call this number?
I
for
can't speak to that.
CCPD to do
Yeah,
that?
so that I can find, I can't speak to that, cause that's more of a police operation that works with the
Yeah.
mayor's office, so I don't know the particulars.
I just wonder if
Yeah.
they could call and say, yeah, I'd love to buy a puppy and show, you know what I mean? Like, almost like a drug bust kind of deal?
So it's not illegal for someone to sell puppies from their home.
No.
What about if they don't have their intact?
So if they don't have an intact permit, then that would be something that we would police. But CCPD is really, the mayor was focused on the road side sales.
And I think that falls under the Texas breeding regulations. That is the loophole I was getting at in November, when we talked about that. A lot of these people are using the Texas breeder, loophole to sell dogs from home. And right now, I don't see a way to police that. I've looked, studied, and it's gonna take people and lawyers smarter than everybody put together in this room to figure out how that loophole, can be closed.
Yeah, I mean, nothing can be 100%
No,
police, right?
right.
You can leave right now and speed 10 miles over, and, right, nothing's, right? But there are efforts being done that haven't been done before.
Yes,
To
absolutely.
mitigate it to where then hopefully then other people start getting the hint that, hey, there's a crackdown going on.
Anybody else on the first? Do we wanna move on past the intakes and outcomes to, I think there's one page of euthanasia. Oh wait, no, that's for cats. So page 4.
And then to illustrate kind of where we're looking at the discrepancies and the bad numbers put in, this shows, our live release rate for last month was 82%. But because of the way that they're tracking the data on old reports, it shows it is higher as 85%. And so it's just finding all of those little caveats where things are in there to fix the data.
Did you have any questions, or did you want us to read them all?
I don't need them.
I just got a question on the, page 2. 70 euthanized dogs.
So these numbers here, we're gonna look at page 1 for that information.
Okay.
on the dogs we euthanized, it was 68.
70, I think.
Yeah, we euthanized 68, 46 dogs and 24 puppies. Because this is also, so what this does is it takes two things. Head for labs, it counts them as a separate, and then it counts them again as a euthanasia. And then there's, I don't know where the other one came from. Like I said, the data for these particular items pulling out of the old chameleons reports is not great. Yes, but we did not euthanize.
When you look at the euthanasia
Oh, it does
outcomes for
equal
that,
70, you're right.
yes,
My math is bad. Okay, so yes,
Yeah, so the front page, it does equal 70, because it broke it up to dogs and puppies, right? So if you go to the last page on page 4, it does break it out, it does equal what's on this back page. So you have the distemper, which we had 25 come in, 0 head for labs, 15 for medical reasons, 30 for public safety, which gave you your 70.
and 30 for public safety, they were just like beyond help.
so we're not, no, they're not beyond help, but they're not safe.
That's it.
They're not safe.
You're not
And
trained.
so, no, they're just not safe. They're not safe. Unfortunately, we don't have enough space, we don't have enough staff. We don't even have the ability or the funds to rehabilitate at that level. And so what we have to do is we have to triage. And so we have to say, can this animal be worked with? And if this animal can be worked with, can we place it with a rescue and it be safe until it is able to be placed? Or is this animal gonna pose a threat while it's being worked with? And what is the risk to that? And I have, this puppy right here who's same age, same breed, same everything, but he never bit anybody and he's not trying to hurt anyone. And I need to make a cage. And so if I have to choose, I'm gonna choose the one that is gonna be more dangerous than the one that is not.
These ones that come in for, that are deemed public safety hazards.
They're bite dogs. 99% of the time, they're bite dogs.
And quite a few of them, especially recently, have been owner surrenders.
Yeah.
Public safety.
So they're coming in and the owners have been harmed multiple times by the animals in their home. We do assessments on the owner surrenders. If they don't have any recent bites, we do assessments on them. We've only had one who was not as described by the owners. Because usually by the time they're willing to bring them here and they understand that if there is aggression issues or they are having, they're attacking them in their home, those sorts of things, the dog is likely to be euthanized. People are really only surrendering them as a last resort.
I was curious about that.
Yeah.
The way I counsel clients, they may have a aggressive dog, maybe bit their kid, maybe bit them in the face. And they want to do something to train them. And I said, okay, most people aren't able to do that.
Correct.
And I always tell them that two things. One is, if you've got a friend, family member, whoever brings their kid in your house and that dog bites your kid, you better hire a lawyer.
Yeah.
Because that's gonna be a problem.
Yeah.
And even if they find it a new home, they have to make sure that new home knows that these dogs are biters. Because if they don't, you better hire a lawyer.
Well, and as a city organization, we cannot willfully place animals into the community that are dangerous.
Cause then we'll get,
Yeah.
we're liable.
So respectfully, when you first started talking about this, what you were describing is euthanasia for space. And that's something I have a really big issue about because I mean, there's just so much discrepancy. Like, it feels like y'all will say anything in regards to this that needs to be said to back up what you're saying. But really what you're saying, what you described just a minute ago, is that you have puppies that never bit anybody, but you have a dog over here that did bite somebody, and you need a kennel, so you have to decide which one to do. That's not a behavioral euthanasia to me. That's a euthanasia for space. When you have a dog that's severe, like severe aggression problems, there's ways to determine that,
Yes.
that are in place that count as a behavioral safety euthanasia. These dogs aren't shown to anybody. I have zero faith in you guys for making these decisions. Now, I'm sure a lot of them are accurate. I'm not out here saying that all 70 of these should have gone out to the public. But I just, based on what I see on Trello, based on what I hear in the community, based on dogs we've gotten that have been on your public safety list.
You don't
them
get
have
dogs
been-
on our public safety list.
You get our hard date list.
You get our hard day dogs.
I have been told, I'm not the one that does that at our shelter, but I have been told that we have received dogs that were considered public
One.
safety risks.
You've taken one since I've been here, and that dog was under evaluation for public safety. At the end of the evaluation, we determined that that dog could safely be placed as long as it went into a home or into a rescue who had a behavior team. You have a behaviorist, so I allowed you to take the dog.
Understood. But what I'm hearing just repeatedly is things like, we need the space, so we had to make this decision. Or,
No, ma'am, I would euthanize that dog if I didn't need the space. If we're euthanizing for public safety, the decision is not to place it into the community. If we're euthanizing for space, that's the hard day dogs. Those are the dogs that you see that we send out every week, and they're out for weeks and weeks, because I have to make space for animals to come in. I understand that you don't believe us, and I'm sorry for that, but at the end of the day, I can only tell you what we're doing. And yes, if I have to choose to kill a dog, I'm going to make the best decision that I can at the time that I have to make it. And so that means I have to evaluate, will this animal go into the community and harm someone, or will it not? And until you're faced with making that decision every day, I would really appreciate if you hold your contempt back. Thank you.
understood.
I got a question. If you don't euthanize for space,
We
how
do
do you take
euthanize
new
for
animals
space.
in?
Correct.
And so I think that part of the solution is you have to euthanize for space.
Correct.
Otherwise, you can't do your job of protecting the community against stray dogs.
And temper outbreaks, because that's another result of,
Right, but what happens is, right, is you may have some members in the community that say, hey, you guys need to, you can't euthanize, you guys have to go no kill, right? So then if we go no kill, you can't take in animals. Number two, this facility wasn't built to be a no kill shelter. Number three, we're about 15, 16 people short, right? We don't have a behaviorist, we don't have the proper facility, we don't have the proper funding. And so all of these components factor into if that was the goal of the council, right? It's the goal of the council as a whole. They say, yes, we want ACS to be a no-kill. Then from there, we would have to then move into that direction. Until then, we're going to euthanasia. There is segments of the community after the community advocates, right, that will go to mayor council to say, hey, why is this dog being euthanized? And then my group has to say, well, we just had calls for dogs that eventually bit 10 people or 5 people, whatever the number is, we have to bring them in. So these are hard decisions that they have to go through every day. It's just there's not a clear consensus or backing of which direction to go, right? So as a whole, the community, we really don't know what the community wants. We don't know what services, right? We don't know how they feel about our services, or as a whole community, what is it that the community really wants? And so to get to that, there's a progression plan, but to get to that, we'll eventually have to do a true community assessment survey to really see as a whole, what does the community want from ACS? Because we don't know.
I'd like to just clarify my opinion, that I don't think that there's like too many dogs being euthanized. I just don't like the lack of transparency that I feel, and I know that lots of others feel, because I've talked to other people about it. So I understand that it's hard, and it is difficult decisions to make every day, and it's really taxing on me. I understand that completely, and I feel for you, because I would not want to be in that situation. But my issue is not so much with the number of animals being euthanized. My issue is with transparency. I don't understand why there's a decision to not allow these animals to be seen, or
Because we're not going to place them.
what if it's somebody's dog?
Those animals are on, the stray bulldogs are available to be seen. Because you only look at Trello, if you're not looking at our website, our 24 Pet Connect, you're not gonna see all of the dogs in the facility. However, all of the dogs in the facility are listed on the website. The only reason we don't post them on Trello is we're not going to plea them to rescue. If it is an owned dog, it's not posted anywhere because the owner is aware that the dog is here. And if they choose not to reclaim the dog, that's the only time it enters our custody.
And to be fair, Ace, we have to deal with fighting misinformation every day.
Yeah.
And that even takes up so much of their time. So we've had people come out and tell folks, oh, they only have 3 officers on staff. So then, no, that's not true. So then we have to go back. So there's what people feel and then what the reality is. So it's, you know what I mean? So we have to be mindful that there's a lot of intentional misinformation being put out.
One month, we only had 2 officers
No, ma'am.
in the field.
So we had 2 officers a day in the field. A day,
Talking
but we
about
had
employed.
multiple officers. Yeah, we've never only had 2 officers employed. So what'll happen is, we did have a period of time where we had gotten down to the number of officers on staff was low.
I think it was like 10.
We had a total of like 10 officers on staff, and then some of them were on light duty, some of them were on leave. And so we did go for a period of about 2 weeks where we only had 2 officers per day in the
Per
field.
day.
Yeah.
Alright.
I have another question, Sonia, about the community assessment. Is that not something that Citygate would have done?
No, so Citygate was just hired just to do the assessment, the community survey and assessment. That would be a whole different project, because that too, that would involve a lot of community stakeholder engagement, right? Engaging you all, of course, engaging city council, to really know what are the right questions to ask so that we get the right answers. And then from there, we would have our communication team then have to promote that, right? And want to get back a certain amount of surveys filled out to really try to get the best representation of the community. So the first goal was to obviously assess the department and see then for our internal operations, right? So we have that, and we're working on those measures. The other part of this is our budget, working on the budget constraints. And then from there, then we want to get into then where we do a community assessment survey. And then from there, after that, then that will help us use to create a true 5-year strategic plan. And that, again, that takes just a lot of stakeholder engagement, right? All the groups involved to create that.
So is that
So
gonna happen?
that's what we want to get to.
Is that gonna happen with the recent extension then? Cause I read that there's a new extension.
Yeah, so the scope is, this wasn't in last year, but the scope is so one was, here's the assessment, but the scope was amended to keep having Citygate work with the team on the implementation of the recommendations, to come do a site visit, to also come and do briefings to council, one-on-one briefings to council. And so Citygate will be with the team until the end of December. So this is to help still continue with staff guidance, still work with the, for instance, this right here, right? This is being worked on with the city and Citygate. And so we're keeping them on to the rest of the year. And so after this year, we'll see if, depending where we are, we may utilize them for another term.
So, sorry, I just wanna make sure I understood you correctly.
Mhm.
They're here for, their extension is for the implementation and working with council and all that, but
Right.
not the community assessment and the other stuff you're
No,
doing.
no,
that's
no,
different.
yeah, that'd be a whole different, and it may, for those, it may be a different, right, a different, consultant that specializes in that, I'm not sure. And so from there, and it's updating the report as well, so the team is working with Citygate weekly on implementation, policies, procedures, and whatnot.
Anybody else on shelter, clinic reports, things like that? New business, animal care services staffing update.
So I'll just speak to the high level overview and then from there. So Monday, right, as you're aware, Katie has elected to step down from the director position until we get a new director of animal care services. And we fully support Katie's decision. It's not due to performance or anything like that. And so we support her decision. So moving forward is we got with a recruiter. So it's Affion. Affion is a recruiter, national recruitment. So they work with municipalities across the nation, and we've been utilizing them for other positions. And so once that's posted, it's probably a week or so, but once we get that posted, there's a window that'll be open for a month. From there, Citygate then reviews all the applicants. They interview the applicants, and then they submit to the city manager. Here is the top tier of the candidates. And then from there, then we review the selected candidates. And then after that, we will engage the city council and maybe have like a panel as well. As far as major stakeholders, the advisory board or whatnot. When we get to, here are the finalists, and have meet and greets or whatnot to get your input.
And you said, oh, sorry, you said Citygate was the one that
No.
was gonna look at them first?
No,
or-
Affion. The recruiter we hire is Affion, yeah. And so we utilize them for the health district, executive, other executive positions. So they're an executive recruiter. As you know, especially animal care, it's very niche. And so when there's a tough position like this, it's best to go with a recruiter firm.
Is the position for a veterinarian gonna be included for that?
Yes, it is, thank you. So that's that one. Then the second one, obviously, you know that.
Before we get to that, can I ask this question? Is it okay to ask what the pay scale is for this position?
Yeah, so I know what's the current maximum listed?
Or which one, the director?
For
or
the director right now.
160 something.
Something, and so that may, and that can change, but again, that's up to the city manager.
Thanks.
From there, on the vet, it's the same thing, we're utilizing the same recruiters, so it's gonna be both go out at the same time. Other cities have used recruiters for vets. It may take some time, so in the interim, the group is working to get a contractual relief help.
So how's that going? Are you finding people?
We have
I
one
know
here today.
What's that?
We have one here today.
Someone for the contractual vet or just the hiring of a?
No, there's just the temporary hiring.
Okay.
So we have ones that we are, trying out to come in on different days. And so we are looking at asking the community vets if they would like to come in for different days, things like that, working on schedules. We're also working with our HR department, to see what we can do, what parameters we have to bring in vets on different days.
So I mentioned, to our organization, our VMA, and I just didn't know what kind of response we might get from that.
Zero, I think.
Cause I thought about coming in, just trying it out, but I don't know how y'all run your anesthesia. Like on my staff,
We can tell you,
they have them all knocked out. I just walk in, do it and leave.
that's what we do. So because there's multiples, like what'll happen is, we'll knock them out, we'll put them on the table, and there's 2 tables, so theoretically, you should be able to work on one. By the time you're done with one, the next one's on the next table.
Like a Taiwanese assembly line.
Essentially, exactly, yes. And then so you can just move from table to table.
But if you'd like to come and walk into the clinic and come see, we can go through it with you, because, we can
Well, I
sign you
mean,
up to come back next week.
I've seen the clinic, but I haven't seen, part of my trepidation would be like, I mean, I'm used to my staff. They baby me. And I need to be baby. But there's fewer surgeons that are faster than I am. Just no bragging.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, sir, the goal is to create an environment for whichever doctor is working, that they are as comfortable as we can make them, even though they're in a clinic that is not theirs. And so, we try to make sure with some limitations, right? We have the drugs that we have. We can order specific suture materials, but like our anesthesia is our anesthesia and our pre-meds are pre-med. But, suture glues, swedged or non-swedged on sutures, glove types, all of those types of things that, really, that you're intimately working with, we try to make sure that we can get you what you would like. And then as far as the technicians have, one of them has experience working with a lot of different veterinarians, the 2 vet assists. They're still kind of learning the ropes, so they're malleable, if nothing else.
Would you have a problem if I came in and did surgery one day and liked the technicians so much that I hired them for our place?
Yes, we
I
would
would.
very,
Yeah,
we would not like that.
So, we need to get that non-compete clause.
Yeah. Noted.
Yeah, and when the team is reaching out, they're reaching out to cities outside of Corpus too, so they're not limiting it to just Corpus. So they're doing a reach out to all other cities within a 3-4 hour radius.
Yes.
This is only for one vet position, it's not gonna.
Correct, so just one vet position, however, and this would be discussed with council, just in terms of all the budget constraints, right? Because part of this, the Citygate assessment is also was determining our gaps in staffing. And so those obviously, anything with funding would have to be council request. And so those are some of the items that will be brought up to council of just saying how much funding that we'll need. And one of those recommendations was to add an additional vet to the team.
I would like to apologize for losing my temper. I am sorry for that.
Thanks, it's okay.
You haven't been to an English department meeting.
No, I have not.
Y'all don't make your surgeons cap down on mask and all that stuff.
No, sir. Well, you do have to, well,
You don't.
if you had long hair.
You can apologize to me later. Look, we'll get that off.
So no, sterile gloves, yes.
Okay.
And then another thing I want to add just on Citygate and Jackie is to also bring up is one is the consultant will be doing briefings with city council at the end of the month, April 30 and May 1 to go over that. And then Tuesday, May 6th, Citygate will and the staff will be giving the presentation to council. So when the agenda is posted on Friday, May 2nd, the report will be attached, so everybody will have access to the report on Friday, May 2nd.
Is the new facility gonna be tied into the Citygate report, or is this a completely separate endeavor?
So what's tied in is facility enhancements, but not the cost, just a recommendation for what facility enhancements are recommended.
Because I've been waiting for that to come up for a vote. I checked the agenda
Yeah.
Friday, and I still haven't seen, I'm just
Yeah.
wondering where that
So
was
many
at.
pieces. There's
Right,
so many
and so
pieces.
with that, so that would have to be revisited, because when that was done, the assessment wasn't finalized or completed, so we have to, and then also we have to look at just in terms of budgeting. So that will be refined, because if let's say we brought it to council, just that part last year, it may not pass because they don't have the complete picture of what animal care is really facing, just in terms of the budgetary constraints with staffing and facility needs. Yeah, because we're talking millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah,
I think
we are.
on staffing alone, we're probably talking close to 1.5 million.
But for a new facility.
No, it's just the staff.
That's just for staffing, and then you add zero, so.
What location is being proposed for this new facility?
Right
It's
here, this
Right
next
next
lot,
door
right next
still.
door.
Yeah.
Existing.
Keeping that in mind,
Oh,
I
yeah,
like to
yeah.
drive around at night looking for dogs and cats and bad stuff going on.
No, the good thing is the acreage is here, and we have the.
So
And
there's
it's a
plenty
good
of room for
location.
growth.
Right.
Right.
And what would happen to this existing facility? Would that be incorporated?
Yeah, so it would just be an expansion, so this would be here, right, some of the recommendations is there'll be some internal, modifications, right?
I know y'all can use the office space like crazy.
Right here, and then of course, adding on, as well, right, to our kennel capacity and whatnot, because one thing is too, right, if let's say today, we got the green light to hire all the staff.
Right.
Well, we're still in a pickle, because more staff, they're gonna bring in more animals, but we're still where we are with our limited capacity and space, right, we still just have, so all those factors and determinants, so where we have to be strategic of where we introduce, certain components.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
Oh, yes, sir, yes, sir. Thank you.
Anything else on the staffing update? Nope. Okay, ASPCA kennel improvements.
So the kennel partitions, phase 1 of the 2-part phase for the kennel partitions, is complete. They start phase 2, which is our bite kennels, tomorrow actually. And so we should be done with that by the second week, in May with the kennel partition repairs. We are waiting to get the components for the AC replacement for our cat/receiving building. And hopefully that will come in. We were looking end of April, but now it may have been pushed back until May. So hopefully sooner than later, but it is going very smoothly, knock on wood.
And I guess we already talked about the new report format.
Yes, we did.
So, does anyone have any future agenda items?
Yes, I've got a request for a future agenda. I'd like some updates, because we were speaking back in, it was September, the disposition of animal care cases. I think Miguel was gonna be working on that. but, seem to fall by the wayside how all the cruelty or abuse or anything involving animals that goes to court, what's the final disposition on that? And just statistics, we don't need necessarily all the down and dirty details of that, but just a trend on what happens, how these cases are finalized, fines, or maybe even some kind of jail term, and how those are handled. Also, we had spoken about, this was before the election, I remember that, PSAs for animal care, just all the free time, take available all free time that is available out there. I remember I had spoken to, one radio station, and they were all on board with working with animal care to get some of those out. Well, it's after the election now, it's like, can we pursue that or make that a future agenda item for her?
Can you shoot that, those ideas to me and then the name of the radio station? Because I
Okay,
know we
yep.
work closely with one radio station right now.
Good, great. And I just feel compelled to give an update on the Good Samaritan Law. Texas House Bill, 349 for the 89th legislature was introduced March 25th. And that was involved, and they're still working on that. It was sent to the calendars, and it would relate to the removal of individuals or animals from motor vehicles. So it looks like that's on its way. It's built right now. It's going to the calendar. That would go to, I guess, the Ways and Means Committee for the refinement, and then come up for a vote on removing animals or individuals from motor vehicles. So it looks like
From what
that,
vehicles?
motor vehicles like cats and dogs and hot cars, kids too. So if you see something, they're looking at letting law enforcement handle that. And there's a provision currently right now, it's still unfinished, on letting, citizens perform some of that. But don't hold your breath. I don't know if that's gonna happen or not, but, if it is voted on this summer, it would go into effect, according to the document that I read, September 1st, 2025. Also, House Bill 2325, and y'all could look into this, statewide dangerous animal registry. That's gone to Public Health Committee. There's a number of other ones on here that I stay up late at night reading about that.
So no, we do follow the legislation. I'm in a meeting every Friday with the Texas Humane Legislation Network. And, I work closely with the IG's office here for the city on bills and the department's stance to recommend to the mayor for the city stances. And, so yeah, we're definitely keeping up with this.
But you're aware of the one for, supervision, CSCD supervision of people who were convicted of, okay, that's coming up too, and I don't know when, but, there's a lot in there right now, it's just tough to keep up with, but,
I think overall, this is maybe like a record of bills filed.
yeah, I noticed it was a huge increase
Yeah.
for this legislative session that's gonna be coming up pretty darn quick.
What we can do if you all want is, cause it's finalized in June, is that we can give, maybe I can even have my RTR director, but we can give kind of an update on, here's if anything passed that will impact animal care services. Even if it's not a direct one to animal care, if it affects us, let's say funding or whatnot, then we can give an update to say what bills could have, a potential impact to animal
There's a
care.
lot of them that seem to have come up within the last 6 weeks, maybe.
Yeah, this is the busy time. They've kind of got in, they've seen what's been put.
Well, I didn't see this many
Start
last year.
scrambling.
last time.
No, it's a lot.
It's a record.
It's a lot.
It has to be a record.
But, if we could just still working on the ones locally, if they're not gonna pursue it, I mean, we can pursue the, final disposition statistics of animal cruelty or animal abuse cases locally, just to see what's going on out there. And then also the, outbreak, it looks like there's a bumper crop of distemper right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've seen that many cases. Are they coming in from a particular neighborhood? Is it citywide?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, they started in the Molina area.
I remember.
And
October.
it's just kind of spread out from there. We haven't seen any across the waterways yet, but we're finding them in city proper neighborhoods everywhere. It's definitely impacting animals of all ages, dogs of all ages. And it is, unfortunately, it's just the new reality for Corpus. That distemper is now, endemic in our community.
And that's where the PSA thing comes in. It's like, well, we can't spend money, then you take advantage of some of the, advertising, get that message out there, get your dogs vaccinated for everything, and, you know, all that, you get them fixed too.
And we make sure that the officers, when they're out in the field, communications is working on a video, to put out about December, and so we're waiting on updates for that. And then, when the officers are in the field, we have them handing out flyers about December and getting vaccines and what to watch for, and trying to educate people as we encounter them. But that's gonna be our biggest, for everyone, our biggest defense is to really get people to take their animals to the vet and get them vaccinated.
Yeah, 'cause there's a lot, but, yeah, we would make that an agenda item to get an update on the, disposition unit. State's not gonna do it, so maybe we can do something like that locally.
Thank you.
And then, you know, take advantage of the PSAs that are out there. Because we've got great coverage right now on Facebook from public information person. It's like, yeah, let's take it further and take advantage of all the free time available in the media. Because I think it came up because we do have still a population of our citizenry that does not keep up with digital media. They're not gonna keep up with social media. So it's like, they're still listening to the radio at work. One of my warehouses that I go to, they've got the radio blasting all day long. It would be perfect for them, and that's a radio station that is all on board with getting in touch with ACS to get out any PSA that they want to put out.
Yeah, that would be great.
Dr. Perkins, did you have something?
Yeah, one thing that I'd like to have is a text message group among the committee.
I don't know.
Don't
So I
break
know
quorum.
you can do that.
Yeah.
You break quorum, and then
Yeah.
from there, it has to be public.
Yeah.
So Texas Public Meetings Act requires that any communications amongst all board members or a quorum of board members has to be public.
So
That's why you can't email each other, like when we email you stuff, we have to blank copy it and send it out and ask you to respond to us.
I take Sonny every once in a while.
Oh, just me.
Well, nobody cares what happens with Sunday.
He's not on the board.
But if it was a group, you know, created and then added me, then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, guys, I gotta go. This is.
But here's part of the deal for me, the reason for it is, I mean, like, I don't check my email maybe as much as I should, but I do get text messaging.
Mhm,
And like, sometimes we have a meeting and we don't have a quorum.
mhm.
And if you had a simple group text mail, are you gonna be there or what? Or there are several times that during this meeting, I've had a question about something, I just had to Google it, you know, to find out what it was. Like, for instance, chameleon, I didn't know what that was.
Oh, sorry.
And so,
Software.
and so, yeah, I Googled it and found out that it was software.
Yeah.
But so if I had a simple question that in a public format might look really, really stupid, then if I just did, I could be incognito on a text message group. But I understand you don't have laws and rules.
But you can text, so
Yeah, you can text
you can
us,
email
yeah.
us you can email
Yeah.
Katie,
Any questions
Cynthia
you want.
anytime with your questions, just like any other member can.
It's just when you guys start talking to each other in a group.
Right.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I've always said this about laws, they're just for stupid people and evil people.
There you go.
And I'm neither one. I should be glad to be.
There you go.
Thank you for the report for me.
I have, one thing to add to future agenda. Since we're going through and looking at all the reports and that kind of stuff, something else I would really like to see is, you know, we go through the numbers, but I'd really like to hear more like subjective information of like, here's our accomplishments from the past month. Like, here's all the things that went really well. Here are things that we're having trouble with. Here are things that we would really like to do, but we just don't have the capacity or the funding to do it right now, but, you know, wanted to get people's feedback. I think, you know, for us to be able to help in the best way that we can, knowing more of like the day-to-day operations and goings-ons is going to be helpful, you know, beyond just looking at the animal numbers. So, I think that kind of ties in with what you're saying with the legislative updates, you know, just kind of having like a month in review to say, here's what's going on, and here's what's coming up too.
And we can use it's like the director's.
Yeah, just something subjective. Yeah.
That's a great recommendation.
Does anyone have any other future agenda items? Is there a motion to
Thank you for
To
lunch.
adjourn.